Earlier this year, one of my predictions in the 3D printing world was that the race to the bottom would continue, with 3D printers becoming increasingly more affordable, but maybe not increasingly better quality. And we saw how that panned out with the 101 Hero, or rather 101 Zero. Coming in at around $150 US shipped is the Tronxy or Tronxy X1, and it's one of the lowest cost 3D printer kits you can buy. So, is it another dud, or could it be one of the best bang for buck kits on the market today? Watch to find out. At around 150 US delivered, or around 200 Australian dollars, I really was not expecting much from this 3D printer, I'll be honest. The machine arrived in a compact, nondescript box, and the parts were fairly safely packed, but nothing too special. There was no paper manual, and I immediately started worrying, thinking this was another 100% community supported kind of a deal. However, my buddy Preston over on his channel Press Reset, who's also been playing with this little printer, and you can see his video on it here, he said to look on the included micro SD card and USB adapter. And what is this? A hugely detailed and logical instruction manual for one of the lowest cost 3D printer kits around. It took me a couple of hours of casual assembly to put the machine together, and I only encountered 3 small issues. There is only one 3D printed component in the kit, which holds the Z-axis motor in place, and in my example, it was printed bad. It was warped to hell. It still works good enough to put the machine together, but it was not a very good printed part. The other issue was the very small Z-axis lead screw and nut, which were hugely binded up initially in my kit. I used the highest quality oil I had on hand and ran it with a cordless drill, disconnected from the motor of course, to free it up, then loaded some G-code which cycled between homing the Z-axis and running to max height, and that freed it right up. Oh, and the screws it comes with to hold the handle on are way too short. Get some longer ones if you intend to actually use that as a handle. But what is the max build size of the Tronxy X1? Well, it has a build volume of 150 by 150 by 150 millimeters, though you will lose a little bit of that as you need to clip the build surface into place. It's not huge, but certainly big enough for most everyday printing projects, and the X1's print bed is not heated, meaning you're pretty much limited to PLA printing. The print surface itself is a little interesting. It's made from a thin sheet of garolite, the same kind of material used in printed circuit boards, just without the circuit part. It's heat resistant, stiff, and dimensionally accurate with just the right amount of flex. However, I've never seen this material used on a non-heated bed before because, like, nothing sticks to it. I quickly discovered though that a thin sheet of glue, either something like Magigoo, a purpose-made solution, or just glue stick, made the first layer stick down really well, and I've had no issues since. And removing prints from the build surface is easy and satisfying. Simply remove the plate and flex it, and the parts pop free. I might have to steal that idea. Leveling is done with 4 screws on the spring-loaded bed and is an entirely manual affair. When you tighten them all down, set the Z limit by moving the switch roughly to where you want it, then manually bringing them up screw by screw to make sure the bed's level. And once you get a first layer, you're pretty much set. I've only had to do it once on my machine because you remove the bed to remove the print. The extruder is a Bowden style setup that takes 1.75mm filament and extrudes through a nice little extruder block with a cooling fan, but no part cooling fan. More on that later. So what do I like about the X1? Well, for movement it uses V rollers. However, unlike a few other kits out there, it actually uses the correct V extrusions, making the movement accurate and smooth, with the rollers wearing evenly, producing very little play in the axes. The rollers aren't adjustable, and each axis uses 3 rollers, which makes sense as it's only possible to have 3 points of contact at any one time anyway. And the rollers themselves can be tightened up properly without binding. So at its price point, I'm super happy with the mechanical design of the X1. Cantilever printers are becoming more popular now due to their decreased cost, and while they won't be as rigid as other designs, I haven't noticed any major issues with rigidity in this machine as yet. It's also super quiet, actually one of the quietest machines I run, and the laser cut acrylic and extruded aluminium frame is actually more rigid than you would expect. Because it lacks a heated bed, it can get away with a very small power brick instead of a dangerous power supply with exposed mains wiring terminals. I get it, wiring up a power supply is a cakewalk for most of you, and the chances of an injury are slim, but it would be irresponsible of me to ever recommend that for anyone beyond tinkerers like myself. Using a power brick, however, makes this kit safe for kids, and considering how easy the instructions are to follow, I think it would actually be a great parent and child activity to put one of these machines together. But how about print quality? Well, I did initially have some severe under extrusion issues, which I linked back to the extruder arm not putting enough pressure on the filament. It's a bit of a pain to adjust this, so I recommend tensioning it properly before you attach the Bowden tube. I also found that I had to shorten my PTFE tube slightly from the kit, maybe 40mm or so, and that improved the print quality drastically. I also used a default Simplify 3D profile with a few minor tweaks, but you should have no issues using any slicer to run this printer. It takes any straight G-code. Print accuracy is far superior to what I expected, with little or no banding issues or artifacts, and it can be run fairly quickly too. 60mm per second is no problem, though if you went any faster you might induce some vibrations into your print because of the cantilever design. But again, it's quiet. You just let it do its thing in the corner, and it didn't ever bother me during operation. But there is a fairly big issue with the stock Tronxy X1's print, which segues into my cons. No part cooling fan. Printing with PLA without a part cooling fan results in prints doing this. Blobs and stringing. This isn't noticeable with prints that don't move between points, such as printing in vase mode, but as soon as you do, you'll start to notice this problem. Although to be fair, this was a pretty nasty test to throw at the poor little thing. The hot end design of the X1 unfortunately doesn't make it super easy to add a fan, so for my tests, I just put a desk fan next to the printer, and I actually saw an immediate improvement in reduction of stringing. Next con is the location of the SD card. Now, the X1 has an external control box connected to the printer with a nest of wires. I'm not a massive fan of this, but I have seen it before in machines like the Wanhao i3s, but at least those printers have the SD card slot accessible on the side of the control box. The X1's microSD slot, however, is at the rear, at the bottom, and it's practically impossible to get to without moving the control box around every single time, which over time will definitely fatigue wires. I do have this microSD to standard SD adapter that I bought from Deal Extreme years ago and used it on my original Wanhao i3, and it did make it slightly easier to load G-code to the printer, but really over time, this would probably send you mad. The Tronxy X1 is a great candidate for cloud printing with something like AstroPrint or Octoprint, so save yourself the pain and set it up with that, something I might be doing to this machine in the near future. And you know another reason you should hook up your X1 to cloud printing? The interface. Oh my god, it has to be the most rage-inducing interface of any machine I've ever tested, ever. The machine is running Repetier firmware, which is navigated with 4 tactile switch buttons and a middle select button. And you have to be super forceful with them to navigate the menu, which has settings hidden all over the place, with select being the right bottom usually. And to add insult to injury, it tries to run this animation between screens, which just, why? I think I'm being a bit over the top. This is how you send a print after loading the SD card. If you've forgotten that you've popped it out, you have to navigate to print. Oh, it isn't detected. Back down to SD card, eject, mount, and then print the file. Just control it remotely, please. Finally, the machine itself has no spool holder, so you have to print or make yourself another solution. Not a big deal, as many of these small low-cost printers lack a spool holder anyway, but it is another consideration. Moving a machine, external control box, and a spool of filament on a holder at the same time, it's certainly not an easy feat, so don't plan on moving it too much. You might damage it. So, does the Tronxy X1 make more expensive 3D printers obsolete? Well, no, not at all. It does, however, provide a very attractive option as a first 3D printer for those on a very tight budget. The safety considerations such as the enclosed power supply also make it a fantastic option for education. I think it'd be super cool for a class of kids interested in mechatronics to be given this kit, put it together with an instructor, and then leave them with a fully functional 3D printer that has loads of upgrade potential, such as adding that part cooling fan, make the machine work over the cloud with Octoprint. You could even add a heated bed if you want to this machine. There is a port for it on the control board. The X1 is a winner in my books as it doesn't need upgrades to function as a 3D printer. You can spend the $150 and get a decent experience, as you can see with these sort of prints, but you don't need to spend more money to make it work in the first place. Not bad for a little Chinese kit, if I do say so myself. This review has been my complete unbiased opinion. I purchased the Tronxy X1 from GearBest myself just to see how good a $150 3D printer could be. Its price does vary depending on flash sales, and you can actually buy it from alternate sources as well. So I recommend waiting for those sales or when coupons come up to get it at the lowest price possible. I also need to mention that quality control can vary considerably with 3D printed kits, especially as demand increases. So with my experiences with this kit, they may vary to your experience with yours, and there has been some reports of loosely fitting bed platforms and that kind of thing. Nothing too serious and nothing you couldn't fix yourself, but just something to keep in mind. If you enjoyed this review and want to see future 3D printing reviews, tutorials, and projects, be sure to subscribe. I'd love to have you on board. My name is Angus, and I look forward to seeing you again very shortly here on Makers Muse. Happy printing, guys. Bye.
It is the latter half of the 20th century, and man has sent rockets into deep space. He has placed satellites into orbit. He has actually